Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. My name is Katelyn, and today we are filming a video that has been pretty highly requested, and I'm really excited to finally build up the courage to share with you guys. We are filming a sourdough video. I'm going to show you guys everything that I do on how I make my sourdough bread and take you through the process. It is, I warn you, 3 days of a process. It can be in 2, which is actually what I'm doing today, which is not normally what I do. Normally it takes me 3 days, but I'm gonna walk you through the process, and I'm really excited to share how I make my sourdough. And yeah, so I hate giving disclaimers, but I do want to say a couple things first of all. So first, I am a beginner, okay? I think I have only been making sourdough for about 4 months, so I'm very new. I'm still learning. You know, my bread doesn't turn out absolutely perfect, like to internet standards. Every single time I make it, there's always like something that I'm sure somebody could critique, but it is edible and it is so good. Like, it is so good. I gave it out as Christmas gifts this year. Everybody loved it. It tastes like bread. It looks like bread. You can cut it. You can put it in a toaster. Like, you can make a sandwich with it. It is fully sourdough bread that is edible, that is delicious, and it is mine, and I love it. The other thing is that there are definitely a million ways to actually make sourdough. So every single time I looked up, when I first wanted to start this journey, I was like, how am I gonna make sourdough? Like, how do I do it? Whatever. There are so many different things people say to do or not to do, or you have to do this, or like never do this, or it takes you 3 days to make it. You could make it in 1 day. You could make it in 2 days. You know, it takes 4 days for your starter to develop. It takes 2 weeks for your starter to develop. You have to buy a starter. You can make a starter from scratch. There are so many things involved. So what I did was I just picked one person and I said, okay, I'm going to follow you. You are going to be my little savior, and you are going to teach me how to make sourdough. So I picked one person, I followed her structure, and then I picked one recipe, and that is what I have stuck to. I am sure there is ways that you can change and adapt and make new recipes. Sorry if you can hear a bell. The cat is going crazy on the floor right now. I'm sure there's many different ways that you can kind of like take different recipes and use different recipes and try new recipes or whatever, but this has worked for me from day one, so I'm sticking to it. So the person that I use to start my starter, to create my starter, is, I think it's, what is it? Okay, so the person that I use to start my starter and how I am always fed my starter is from the Sourthern Sourdough Co. She's on TikTok. She also has a blog. But she has a whole playlist on her TikTok of how she starts her sourdough. She uploaded a TikTok every single day of how she fed it and how she created this routine for herself. So that is what I followed for 2 whole weeks to create my starter. The recipe that I follow is from Allison Bickerstaff. So she has on her website a whole page of how she does her sourdough. So that is like the step-by-step process that I follow when I bake my sourdough. That is the step-by-step process of how I bake my sourdough. It's the recipe I use. There's a couple things that I tweak, which I will explain to you guys obviously. But for the most part, those are the 2 women that have helped me create my sourdough. So all the disclaimers out of the way, here we are. Today is Friday. So the way that I normally do this is that I take my sourdough starter out of the fridge on Thursday morning, because I only make bread on the weekends. So instead of having to feed my starter every single day throughout the week, I put my sourdough starter in the fridge. On Thursday morning, I take it out of the fridge. I let it come to room temperature throughout the day. And then by nighttime, before I go to bed, which is normally around like anywhere between like 7:30 and 9:30, I'll feed my starter. And then in the morning when I wake up around 6 a.m., I'll be able to start my loaf of bread. However, last night I went to bed and I completely forgot to feed the starter. So this morning when I woke up, I fed the starter. And really, you only need about 6 hours for your starter to rise. Everybody's is different. It's all based on like the temperature of your house, the temperature of like the water that you use, the like type of flour that you use. All these things are like factors in how long it takes for your starter to rise, but I will show you. And I fed my starter this morning. It was about where this blue, you can't really tell because the jar is so full, but when I fed my starter this morning at 6, it was to the blue, and now it is to about here, which is almost double. And it is 11:15, so that's perfect. I was planning on starting my dough at 11:30, 12 today, so that's perfect. The way that I like to do it normally is that I actually put, when I do my discard, these are all things, if you don't know what I'm saying, please go watch the Sourthern Sourdough Co. TikTok, where she talks all about starters, and then come back. So what I do, when I discard my starter, I put it into a separate container, and then I feed this, and I feed my starter. My starter will end up going back in the fridge by tonight. And then my discard is what I use, like the discard with the activated whatever. This will go into my recipe. So she is still growing. I didn't end up putting like a mark or anything, but she was like here when I put it together. So she's about double. So they're about ready to be baked with. So that's the first little caveat that I have. So once it comes to 11:30, 12-ish, we will start making our sourdough. Okay, it is basically 11:30. So we are going to start to make the sourdough bread. So what you will need, again, I follow the recipe from Allison Bickerstaff, which I will link down below, but there's a couple little things that I like tweak a bit, so I'll just kind of share those as I go. So things you will need, obviously you will need your sourdough starter that you have prepped and ready to go. You'll need a very large bowl. This one, I don't know how big it is, but she's big. You'll need a scale because it is like weight measurements for making sourdough. You need some type of wooden spoon. It would work perfectly fine, or like a plastic spatula. I have one of these. It's called a Dutch mixing thing. I don't know. There is a real word for it. I bought a set off of Amazon, which I can link down below for you guys if you'd like, which came with this. It came with like a little bowl scraper. It came with a bench scraper, a bunch of stuff to make sourdough. So I can link that down below. Also have a bowl scraper, but honestly, a lot of the time to mix, I just end up using my hands at the end. So your hands are also great tools. I take my rings off because I don't like getting all the gunk in my ring. So the way, again, that I do this is you're supposed to combine all your ingredients, mix them together, and then you're going to let it sit for about 10 minutes, and then you're gonna add your salt. What I like to do is I do my water and my starter in here, mix it really, really well so that it gets frothy. Then I will add in my salt, and then I will add in my bread flour and let it all rest together. I do not notice a difference if I add the salt later versus now. Only big difference is that while I'm mixing throughout the process, is that it's just a little bit more watery when I add the salt later. So I just like to add the salt sooner. So anyways, what you'll need is 560 grams of filtered warm water and your entire sourdough starter that you've separated. Do not get rid of your whole starter. It's the part that you've separated. Mine ends up being around 180 to 200-ish grams. I've even had like one that was like 220 grams. It just depends on how much it rises and how much starter you have. So I would aim for that kind of range when you're measuring it out. So what I do, normally what I do is I take my filtered water out of the fridge. So I will measure out 560, then I will put it into a bowl and pop it in the microwave until it's just like a little bit warm to the touch. Let me try and angle this so that you guys can kind of see. So have my scale here. Let's zero it out. Adding this, 0. Okay, and then you're gonna add 560 grams of filtered water, and it does have to be filtered. There's something along with like the bacteria and like yeast that your starter produces that it just thrives better in filtered water. Sourdough is demanding, okay? It's a little bit dramatic, but you just have to deal with it. Okay, so there's my water in there. I'm gonna zero this out. Now I'm going to add your starter. It smells delicious. Something you can test to make sure that your starter actually is working is you just take like the tiniest little bit, drop it in your water, and if it floats to the top, which mine just did, which you can't see, maybe I'll show you. Can't really tell, but this is floating right there. There's a little bit that sinks to the bottom, but for the most part, she's floating. But yeah, if it floats, then you're in the clear. So I'm going to add this. There we go. We are at 210. So I will take this off of the scale. Now I'm just gonna take my little, basically like a whoop, like a whisk, my whisk, and just mix it all together. This is loud. So you can kind of see it gets a little bit frothy. Once it gets frothy and everything is pretty well incorporated, I will put this back on the scale, zero it out. Woo. And I'm gonna add 27 grams of sea salt. It's gonna feel like a lot of salt. But if you don't put the proper amount of salt in, your bread will not taste good. Perfect, 27. Again, gonna give that a mix. Now we're gonna add in our bread flour. So it is very important that you do use bread flour. Bread flour has a lot of protein in it, so it helps to activate the yeast more. So you end up putting 900 grams of bread flour in. I have heard of people using all-purpose flour. I personally have never tried, and bread flour works for me, so I use bread flour. So I cannot comment on that, but I'm sure you can use it. So that is all the ingredients that you need to make your bread. So take it off the scale, turn it off, and then I use this to kind of just incorporate everything. And then once it like mostly forms together and it becomes hard to use your arm, I get my hands in there. You can use this obviously the whole way. It just takes a little bit of elbow grease, which I'm not always wanting to do. So once it's looking like this, once it kind of looks like this is when I start to use my hands. I like to get my hands just a little bit wet because it helps to let the dough not stick as much to your hands, but it will stick. It'll feel sticky. So you basically just start kneading the dough with your hands. And you can do this for up to 10 minutes. So I've never had to do it longer than that, but like, I don't know. You can't over knead at this point. So when you come later into the recipe, you really want to use your movements to a minimum because it takes the air out of the dough. But right now, you really want to make sure your dough is really well incorporated to make sure there's no really like floury pieces or too wet of a piece or anything like that. So the dough kind of comes together. You'll notice that you have a lot of flour and stuff stuck on the side of your, whoa. You have a lot of flour and stuff stuck on the side of your bowl. You can take like some type of bowl scraper. See, the hands get pretty nasty. So you can take a bowl scraper and kind of just get as much flour as you can off the sides. But basically you're trying to just make a shaggy dough is what it's called. So you want it to be well enough incorporated that when you're going through and feeling with your hands, you can't feel any like doughy or floury dry spots. But you don't want it mixed so well that you feel like it's like it shouldn't look smooth by any means. It will look smooth at the end. It will not look smooth right now, no matter what you do. It she will not be smooth. So your dough will get really stringy and sticky, which is a good thing. So when it starts to get pretty sticky is when I know, like, okay, she's pretty mixed. Pretty well mixed. So I will get as much off my hands as I can. Again, this doesn't need to be any type of uniform ball at all. It'll come throughout the day as we're stretching and folding and doing all those things. So I'm going to take as much off my hands as I can. And I'm just going to take the L on this, on my hands. Let me clean my hands and I will be back to show you the rest of this. Okay, so at this point, this is what your dough will look like. Really shaggy, really sticky. Doesn't really have, like, it has a little bit of a form to it, but it is very textured. So now you're going to let your dough rest for about 45 minutes to an hour. What you will do is get a clean dishcloth, wet it. I like to use warm water just because I feel like it helps keep in the moisture and the heat. And all you will do is rest your towel over your dough like so, and you will leave it in somewhere where it is like fairly warm. If you have a colder house, we keep our house pretty cold. So what I like to do is stick mine in the oven and just turn the oven light on. Do not turn your oven on, but you just stick it in the oven or stick it in a warm spot, turn on the light, because it'll just keep enough moisture in there, and then it'll help, or heat in there, and it'll help let it rise. So we're gonna wait 45 minutes to an hour. You'll notice that it comes risen a little bit, and then we will start our stretch and folds. Okay, it has been an hour, almost. It's like 50 minutes, but I'm going to take this out of the oven that only had the light on. So when we take it out, this is what it looks like. So it hasn't doubled by any means. It kind of just like sets. It rests for a minute. So I'm just gonna quickly wash my hands. So this is when you're gonna start your stretch and folds. So stretch and folds are really simple. This is like the least tedious, or this is the least involved task that you have to do. You're gonna do 4 sets of stretch and folds every half an hour to 45 minutes. I keep mine on the half hour just because it's easy. But all you do, you want to have your hands a little bit wet. Mine are still a little dry. You want to have your hands a little bit wet so that the dough doesn't really stick to your hand. And all you will do is, you kind of stick your hand in, you'll pull up on the dough, it'll get really, really stretchy, and then you will fold it over itself. And then you're going to turn it like in a clock 15 minutes or a quarter, and then you will pull up, stretch again, pull, place down, and then pull and place down. It'll be really loose the first 2 stretch and folds that you do, but eventually it'll form your dough. So this is how it looks now already. It looks much smoother, as you can tell. So all you have to do, leave it, put your towel over it, still damp. Again, you can put it back in the oven again if you'd like, or just leave it on your counter. And then you're gonna set a 30-minute timer and come back and do this 3 more times every 30 minutes. Okay, our second set of stretch and folds. Taking out, and here's the dough. It kind of stretches out a little bit, I find. Like, people describe it as that it's rising, which it is, but I find it more stretches, especially if you have a bowl like mine that is really wide at the bottom. So anyways, that's what it looks like. And you just go through the same process. Get your hands a little bit wet. I like to kind of scoop both my hands under. I'll peel off the bottom because it'll be sticky a little bit to the bottom of your bowl. Peel off the bottom, and you want to pull it to where it almost is starting to break. You can feel it starting to break in your hands, and then you're just laying it, and I kind of like stick it, like squish it into the opposite side that you're on. And then you do your little twist, pull, and again, it'll start to get much tighter. So I kind of do a little bit of a wiggle and then stretch it over, push. My dough feels like extra sticky today, which doesn't normally feel this sticky. I don't know if this is a bad sign. I'm gonna stretch and then squish. So right now what you're doing with the stretch and folds is you're creating layers to the dough, which is what makes it have all those like nice holes at the end when you have your sourdough. So again, here is a look at what the dough looks like. Every time it's gonna get, cat, I don't know, maybe my voice just like freaks her out and she just gets really hyper, but anyways, it's gonna get really, every time you stretch and fold it, it'll get a little bit more smooth. So we're going to, once again, place the cloth over top. I'm not gonna put it back in the oven because I feel like maybe that's why it's getting a little bit more sticky, because it might be too hot or too warm in there. So I'm just gonna leave it on my counter, which is how I know, which is how I normally do it. So again, on the counter, and set a timer for 30 minutes. We are back again, 30 more minutes later, and we are doing our third stretch and fold. Here's how the dough looks. So this is the third one, so we will do one more. At this point, the dough is starting to get pretty tight. So it takes a lot for me to actually be able to stretch it out. It's pretty stretchy, and it really, like I really have to press it in to itself. And then when I get to like the third and the final stretch, it like barely covers the entire little dough. So that's how you know it's good, because it's getting nice and tight. You're creating gluten essentially. I don't really know. Don't come to me for like the scientific reasons of what's going on. I just explain what I'm seeing, okay? But okay, here is after the third stretch and fold, nice and tight. It's also much less sticky for me. Last one, it was very sticky. This one was not sticky nearly as much as it was last time. So covering up for the last 30 minutes, and then we will come back and do the final stretch and fold. And then that is when it sits for like 5 to up to 10 hours. So the hard part, the laboring part, is almost done. So letting it rest for another 30 minutes. Okay, 30 minutes later, obviously I've gotten cold and I put on a sweater. But here we are. Here's the final stretch and fold. Again, it doesn't really get bigger, it just gets wider. So we're gonna do the last stretch and fold. Make sure my hands are nice and wet. And this one will be your hardest stretch and fold. The dough will not really want to stretch, so it's really gonna take some effort to pull the dough, but you really don't want it to rip. You want to try your hardest to make sure it doesn't rip. So here we go. And this is when your dough should get the smoothest that it has been. It will really look like dough, feel like dough, nice and smooth. And it should feel pretty tight. And you will notice too that your dough will start to actually have air bubbles in it. Try not to pop the air bubbles, because those just add to the texture of your bread when you're all done at the very end. Here is what your dough should look like at the end. It's like super jiggly and nice and smooth. If I like show you the bottom of it, because obviously we've been pulling from the bottom every time, she is very smooth. So I'm going to very gently, once again, put my little cover over it here. And I'm going to let this rest now, like I said, for anywhere between 5 to 10 hours. So this is where it kind of comes into like, you kind of just take a guess. But what I like to do is I like to leave it for at least 5 hours. I will check on it. It should have doubled in size. So kind of pay attention to where it's at now, what the shape is, what the size is. When I first started, I would take a picture of it just to be able to compare, because it's kind of hard to tell if it's risen or not when you first like start. But you're gonna let it sit for at least 5 hours, come back, have a look at it, and then kind of determine like, okay, should I let it rest a little more? Should I let it not rest as long? A good way to tell is when you poke it, not aggressively, but if you kind of just press down on it and release, it should slowly bounce back. So that'll be a good indication of how long it is. But we'll come back at 5 hours. I'll show you how it looks, and I'll let you know what I decide, if I'm gonna let it rest a little longer or let it like do its thing now. But yeah, so now we let it rest for like 5 hours. And again, you can leave it in the oven to let it proof and a little bit warmer. It'll make it go a little bit faster, which if you want to use less time, like if you don't want to wait a full 10 hours, like I definitely do not want to wait 10 hours because that'll put me at what? That'll put me at midnight. You can put it in the oven and it'll help kind of progress it a little bit further. I'm going to be leaving my house now, so I don't want to put mine in the oven because that just kind of stresses me out. So I'm just gonna leave it on the counter, just covered with its damp towel. And then we will be back in 5 hours to show you how she's doing. Okay, so it's been about 5.5 hours, and here is what the dough is looking like. It has most definitely doubled in size. It's like just, I feel like at double the size. And if I press down on it, ooh, it's actually very sticky, which normally it isn't. So I'm wondering if I've done something wrong in this recipe, but I'm gonna let it sit a little while longer. I just don't feel ready to shape it yet because it just feels a little too sticky and jiggly for me. So I'm gonna leave it covered, put another like 5 hour timer on and see how it goes. I'll probably come down and check it in like 2 or 3 hours and then probably bake or probably shape it at that point. Okay, everyone, I look disheveled as heck because it's nighttime. I've had my cozy bath. I've been relaxing. Like it's nighttime. It is 10:30, 10:20 actually. It's been just over 8 hours now that the dough has rested. So I have about 2 hours left, but she is ready. She is nice and humongous. And when I press on it, still a little sticky, but way better than what it was earlier. And she has a bit of a bounce back. So we are ready to shape the dough. And this is the last step for, well, first part of the last step for tonight. So what you will do, first things first, you want to make sure you have a clean surface because you will be pouring your dough out onto the counter. You can also flour your counter if you'd like. I don't put a whole lot of flour down, but I put a little bit just because it is a little bit sticky. And then you're gonna need some type of baskets, or you can use bowls that are just lined with some type of like linen cloth. These are battens. Anyways, again, this came in that pack that I'm linking down below in Amazon. But it just helps to shape your dough and what your dough is going to sit in for the night. So we have an oval and a circle. We're going to take a little bit of flour and just lightly flour the surface. And then you will also flour inside of your baskets. Then you are just going to let your dough naturally come out. I literally just leave it and let gravity do its thing, and it'll come out beautifully. And you just kind of pull it very gently out of the bowl. This one's extra sticky, so I'm gonna flour a little bit more on the top. Now you will need some type of something to cut your dough. A bench cutter is like the best thing to bench knife, I think it's what it's called, not cutter. Bench knife is like the best thing to use just because it's super easy and you can really like eyeball your dough. But you're just gonna cut it in half or into quarters or whatever, however big you want your loaves. I find cutting this specific recipe in half to make 2 loaves is perfect. So you'll put your first half to the side. Ooh, she is sticky. And again, you want to be really gentle because you don't want to lose all those air bubbles that you were spending so long to create. So what you will do, oh my God, holy crap. Okay, so now what you're going to do is very gently spread your dough. So you just pull a little bit, not like not crazy, just pull a little bit at the edges. You will feel the air bubbles, you will pop air bubbles, but just try your best not to. And like, I don't know if you can see, but like there's like tons of air bubbles in this. So this is actually a really good dough. I'm very excited to see how this turns out. So spread it all nice. And then to shape your dough, I'm not the best at this, but I try my best. So you're going to fold one side to the center and then fold the other side over top of that one in the center. And then you will start from one end and just start to roll in your dough. And it will feel like you're popping bubbles, and it's okay. You're just trying to preserve them as best you can. You are not going to save all the bubbles. Don't worry, you'll still have bubbles in your dough. So then you kind of get this like round thing. Like this is kind of what your dough will look like. And then what you're going to do is use two hands. Again, some people like look so good at doing this, but you're going to make a sweeping motion, a push and then a sweep. So you push up and you're cupping your hand so that you're grabbing the bottom of the dough that's on the counter. You're kind of twisting and then you're pulling down and you're making, that pop was the bubble. You're making like a pinch almost, like you're doing this with your fingers underneath of the dough. And then you'll bring it back up and then do the same thing. And then bring it up and then do the same thing. And you're kind of just like tucking the excess dough underneath. And then sometimes like I do this like extra pinchy kind of motion, and then you can kind of like take your hands, press in, and then twist and push to the counter, because you're just creating tension. That's like the main thing you want to do. You want your dough to just get really nice and tight in its shape. So once you're satisfied with the shape, this isn't the final shaping, so don't be too picky. So once you're satisfied with it, you can just kind of rest it to the side, and then you will do the same thing for your other one. And then this one, because that one's a circle or a sphere, I guess, this one we're going to make into an oval, I guess. Method. The cat is just, it's her witching hour, so she's just going to town. So same method, so over, and then you'll just start folding and rolling it up. Roll. Huge bubbles in this dough. This is crazy. I've never had this many bubbles before, honestly. And then this one, since you're keeping it as like a long ways, I like to honestly just keep it how you've rolled it. I just kind of tuck the ends a little more, and I do like I kind of do a saw like back and forth, like a rocking motion, and I'm pressing a little bit at the top of the dough, just above where the counter is, pinching, and then pressing down on the counter, and then pinching, pressing down on the counter. I feel like that's the best description I have. And then kind of tuck your edges like so, kind of like that. I don't know, that wasn't like the best description. So anyways, okay, so those are your two little dough babies. And now what you want to do is let them rest on the counter just like this for 15 minutes. So I get a towel wet, and this is your final rest. So you just lay your towel on top so that they're covered and that they stay moist. And you're gonna let them rest for 15 minutes. You will do one final shape, and then you can put them in your baskets. Okay, 15 minutes later, I can finally go to sleep. So you've let your little dough babies rest. Now what you're gonna do, if you would like, you can shape them one more time. I typically just kind of keep them how they are, honestly. Like, I feel like they've kind of done their thing. They, you know, they're good. I give them a little bit more something. What am I saying? I'm so tired. Guys, come on. Give them a little bit more of a shape. Nothing crazy though. So give them a little bit shape. Have your basket. Have your dough. You have your basket. what you'll do is you use some type of bench scraper. You can also just pick them up, but the bench scraper just makes it easier. You're just going to slide the bench scraper under, and you're gonna put your top side down into the basket like so, so that your seam is on the bottom. So you can kind of see, I mean, you can't really see. There's a seam on the bottom. And then what you will do is you'll do a final little shape, and I like to just pinch together. So I kind of press down and then pinch the sides in. And that is just adding that final bit of tension. You can kind of pull your ends together, tuck them in, make them all nice and tight. You're gonna pop lots of bubbles when you do this, but it's okay. And you will have a pretty distinct seam now. Once you bake them, you will not. But this is the bottom of your dough. And once in the morning, when you flip it, when you go to take it out of the basket, the top is gonna be beautifully shaped. Now we have our 2 loaves in their little basket beds for the night. And now you're just gonna cover them and put them in the fridge to rest for at least 8 hours. Normally what I do is I'm putting these in the fridge between like 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. And then I'm baking with them around 6 a.m. So probably like 6:30, maybe 7. But they can stay in the fridge for up to 48 hours. So now these are gonna go into the fridge, and I will see you guys in the morning when we bake them. I'm so excited. I'm also excited to go to sleep. So, okay, putting these in the fridge, and I'm gonna also go to bed. So, see you in the morning. Good morning, everyone. It is the next day. Don't mind the appearance. I'm not getting ready just to put bread in the oven because it's gonna be a cozy day today. So this is what you're getting. So today is baking day. This is the best and easiest day. So what you will need today is to have a Dutch oven. You can bake without a Dutch oven. It's just that it makes it a little bit easier and the rise is a little bit easier. There are ways though to bake this without Dutch oven. So if you need to know how, look up how to do that. But again, this is how I do it. But all you do is you want to place your Dutch oven in your oven while the oven is off, and set your oven to 500 degrees and then start. And the reason you're doing this is because you want your Dutch oven to heat up at the same rate as your oven. So that way the inside of the Dutch oven is hot, so that when you go to put your dough or your bread balls into the Dutch oven, there's already heat in there, so it helps to make it rise faster. Okay, my oven just went off, that it's ready. So you scrunch your parchment paper, it'll fit better in your pot. And then if you have your dough, you'll notice that your dough rose a little bit in the fridge last night, which is good. So place your parchment on top and then flip the basket. Pull this off. You pull the lid off, and then you will have a perfectly shaped bread dough thing. And then I just sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top. There's a specific kind of flour that people use. I believe it's like a rice flour. I just use regular flour. I find it doesn't really make a difference to me. But I just coat the top of this with flour. When you're scoring your dough, you want to make sure that you're doing 1 or 2 scores that are deep into the dough, and then you're doing a couple if you want to do like the decorative kind of scoring. So whenever I have the circle ones, I always just do like a cross across it, just because I find it like pops up nice. So I'll do one right down the center. And again, these ones, you want them to be deep. And then I want to cross. And then I even kind of go back if I feel like it didn't get deep enough. because this is what's gonna let your bread expand. So you can kind of see as across. And then I just kind of go in and do a little bit of hatching on the other areas. Again, nothing crazy. You don't like need to do anything really intricate. I think alt bread when it comes out of the oven looks stunning anyways, so any cute little design you do will look cute. And you can also just use a regular knife. These blades are just like a little bit more precise. But yeah, okay, so now that it's all scored, we're gonna bring it over here. So make sure you are using oven mitts. This is hot. So I'm gonna work kind of fast, so I'm gonna talk while I do this. So I'm gonna open up the oven, grab my Dutch oven. Oh my God, it's so hot. Close the oven so that you have the heat kept in. And then you're going to grab your dough, plop it in, and then put your lid on and stick it back in the oven. So you're gonna have it in there for 20 minutes with the lid on, then you're gonna take the lid off, and then you can cook it for anywhere between like 10 to 20 more minutes. I normally stick just with like this oven, I normally stick to around like 10 to 15 minutes extra. At my one at my mom's, like the one that I had before, I was cooking it for another 20 minutes. Sometimes I would even cook it in with the lid for 25 minutes. So it really just depends. You'll kind of see the coloring. I'll show you like what it looks like when I decide to take the lid off, and then what it looks like when I take it out after the 15 minutes. But that's like basically what you do. And then you're going to do that for the second loaf too. So we will see what it looks like. I'm excited. Okay, oven just went off. Here is what we're looking like. So it smells so good. So I'm gonna take the lid off. So here is what it looks like, nice and fluffy. There's a little bit of browning on the top. So I'm just gonna put it back in, and I'll put it on for 10 minutes and then see how it is. Okay, 10-minute timer just went off. I also just shocked myself on the oven. And here, oh, nice and foggy is what it looks like. I'm gonna leave it in for like 5 more minutes. I just like mine to be pretty, pretty crispy. So like I like to have a good crust. So I'm gonna put it in for 5 more minutes. Okay, this is after 5 more minutes. And that's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna take it out and then show you guys. I do this with 2 hands. Okay, so that's the finished bread. It looks beautiful. Here is it all completed and baked, and it smells so freaking good, and yeah, looks amazing. Mine gets pretty crusty on the bottom, which I like, but yeah, beautiful, love it. So now you're gonna want to cut into it already, because you're like, oh, I just want warm bread. You have to let it sit for at least 2 hours to let it completely cool, because it's actually still cooking on the inside while it's really hot. So we're gonna wait at least 2 hours, and then we will cut into it, and I will show you guys it cut into. Maybe I'll put a little video here. But yeah, that is the finished bread. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, even if you like don't follow through and make this like exactly the way that I do. I really encourage you to look into making sourdough. It's a really rewarding process. I love being able to like make our own bread and never have to buy bread from the store. It's just like, it's so rewarding, and it's like the best tasting bread. It's so good for you, and yeah, I just love it. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.